After comparing the first games and then their sequels, there was only one place left to go. So over the past week, I replayed Jak 3, Ratchet and Clank 3, and Sly Cooper 3. All three of these games are genuinely great, but one of them stood out above the rest. So the question is, which one of them still holds up today? But before we get into it, I've got a post going up right now asking for your most unpopular Jak, Ratchet, and Sly opinions, which I'm going to turn into a video. And also, if you've been enjoying the series so far, consider subscribing. Let's start with Sly 3. I really enjoyed that the whole game is a flashback to what happened at the start of the game about gathering your crew. Each new and returning character is a great addition, each with their own personality. And I honestly think that this is one of the best endings to a series when the developers are moving on. The teaser that they left for the next game was also a really nice touch. Next is Ratchet and Clank 3. Honestly, the story here is still really strong. All of the characters are super memorable, and Dr. Nefarious is an iconic villain. They still use him for today's games. I love his obsession with hating all organic life, and I think that this game has some of the best humor in the series. Everything clicks, and I was fully engaged with the story from start to finish. Lastly, we have Jak 3, and I'll be honest, I'm not usually a fan of reusing villains from older games, but somehow the Jak games always pull me into their lore. They start so simple, and by the end of it, you're fighting in space and against giant robots. I just love how the story keeps expanding as each game goes on. It consistently raises the stakes and makes the worlds feel bigger and bigger. The verdict: Sly 3 delivers a great send-off, Ratchet and Clank 3 is packed with personality and humor, but Jak 3's consistently expanding lore and scale win it for me. Round 1 goes to Jak 3. Let's start with Sly, and I might sound crazy, but between Sly 2 and 3, the controls feel a bit tighter, maybe a bit less floaty. They stuck with the same open world style, and I wasn't forced into auto balancing everywhere, which is nice. That being said, in the smaller mission areas, like the mines in Australia, for example, I felt forced to basically jump and mash circle from spot to spot. I did really enjoy the mixture of open world freedom and these tighter mission sections, but the Sly games I think rely a bit too much on the auto balance feature for their platforming segments. Then there is Jak 3, and there really isn't too much to say here, and I don't think that's a bad thing overall. The controls and movement are identical to the previous games. The addition of Light Jak and the wings is probably the biggest change in terms of movement, and it feels fine. Overall movement is just as good as it was before, but it really didn't push things forward or innovate in the way you might have hoped. And finally, we have Ratchet and Clank 3. In my opinion, really hasn't changed much from the second game. Strafing and turning are smooth and responsive. I'd say Ratchet's core movement is definitely on par with Jak, and in addition to him having the heli and the thruster packs, along with the charge boots, it makes him feel more fun to control. Overall, Ratchet is still the most enjoyable character to move around in these games. The verdict: Sly 3 tightened up the controls a bit, Jak 3 plays just as well as it did before but doesn't innovate much, and Ratchet's movement combined with what we'll talk about in the next chapter makes him the most fun to play. Round 2 goes to Ratchet. Let's start with Sly first. Combat in Sly 3 feels pretty similar to the previous games, but the addition of multiple playable characters definitely adds variety. Sly still handles the agile stealth takedowns, Bentley is slower but he has his gadgets, and Murray basically just plows through everybody with brute force. Every character has their own combat style, which keeps things interesting, even if the core system hasn't changed much. Some fights still feel basic with button mashing, but swapping between the characters adds enough variety to make it enjoyable. It's not reinventing combat, but it makes the experience feel more dynamic compared to Sly 2. Next up is Jak 3, and I think my opinion here might surprise a lot of you. First off, I love the new guns. Adding 12 in total was a great idea, and each one has their own identity, but what really lets down the combat for me is the reflector beam gun. This one weapon is so overpowered, you can use it through the entire game. It makes every other gun, and even the light and dark Jak abilities, feel a bit redundant. I honestly wish all of the weapons were balanced closer together because they're all so unique. They did fix Dark Jak, and outside of a few missions where you're forced to use the new abilities, a lot of these new additions don't really get much use. That being said, I still think Jak 3's combat has more depth than the second game. I just think that it could have been balanced a bit better. And then finally, we have Ratchet and Clank 3. This is the section where the developers really doubled down on weapons. Instead of just giving us a single upgrade for each weapon, they now have 5 levels in total, which really gives the combat a lot more life. The variety and progression make trying to max out all of your favorite weapons super satisfying, and it keeps fights dynamic and fun throughout the entire game. It feels like they took everything that worked in the previous game and amplified it. The verdict: Sly 3 keeps combat fun with character variety, Jak 3 adds depth with its expanded weapon roster, but it's held back by a few balance issues, and Ratchet & Clank 3 fully commits to weapon progression to make combat the most engaging overall. Round 3 goes to Ratchet & Clank. Let's start with Ratchet. Honestly, I think this game has the weakest level design of the entire series. We still have the planet hopping from the first and second games, but a lot of the planets feel like they've just been turned into battle arenas. Unlike the previous game where each planet had 2 to 3 paths that you could take, Ratchet & Clank 3 has many planets where it just has a single direction to go, which makes the exploration feel a bit limited. Next is Jak 3, and I really enjoyed the new open world areas. Exploring Spargus City, the Wasteland, and Haven City was a lot of fun, and the locations themselves are genuinely interesting. The levels have solid platforming and combat, but the same issue persists from the previous game: the travel time. Driving out to certain locations can take a long time, and when you combine that with the sand physics and the constant spawning marauders that seem to be designed just to slow you down, traversal in the desert starts to feel a bit more annoying over time than it did enjoyable. The levels themselves are good though, it's just the journey to get there that can really drag. And finally, Sly 3. I loved the open world design in this one. The hubs feel more compact than in Sly 2, and I also enjoyed having to learn the paths to reach each mission. The missions all feel fun and fresh. Some of them feel a bit mini-gamey, but nothing really overstays its welcome. I had a lot of fun exploring and completing missions throughout the entire game. The verdict: Ratchet 3 has some limitations with linear planets, Jak 3 has a lot of fun levels, but long travel times can make it drag, and Sly 3 nails the compact, engaging hubs and fun missions. Round 4 goes to Sly. And finally, we have the music and sound design. And this is so tough because all of these games, in my opinion, are a 10 out of 10 for music. Sly 3 still has the dynamic music system, which I really enjoy, even though Jak 3 decided to drop it. That being said, if I had to pick one overall winner, I think Ratchet & Clank 3 takes it this time. There are so many bangers in this soundtrack, and it fits the tone of the game perfectly. On top of that, the Courtney Gears song is kind of hilarious, and it adds so much personality. The verdict: all 3 soundtracks are great, but Ratchet & Clank 3 stands out with variety, personality, and unforgettable tracks. So looking back at all the rounds, each game clearly shines in different areas. Jak 3 surprised me the most with how much it leans into expanding its world and lore. Sly 3 delivers one of the most satisfying send-offs in the series, and Ratchet & Clank 3 consistently nails moment-to-moment gameplay. If you care about story and scale, Jak 3 definitely stands out. If you want tight level design and character-driven moments, I think Sly 3 is hard to beat. But if you're looking for a game that is fun every single time you pick up the controller, I think Ratchet & Clank 3 stands out, and I think it's the winner here. But replaying every installment in this series really highlighted how each game keeps expanding and adding new features. It made me realize that a lot of modern games, even with their crazy graphics and their features, aren't half as memorable or as confident as these 3 games were. But what do you think? Which final entry is the best? Jak 3, Ratchet & Clank 3, or Sly Cooper 3? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.